let's talk about Swami Vivekananda and the US, because it's a very relevant topic right now. I'll begin with the chant. Om Namah Shriyati Rajaya Vivekananda Surye Satchitsuka Sarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Swamine Tapaharine. Om. Salutation to Swami Vivekananda, the king of monks and the controller of passions, who is absolute being, consciousness, and joy itself, who is the world teacher and who is the destroyer of misery. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. What I've thought about a lot is that Swamiji, or Swami Vivekananda, had a very, very brief life. And in his extremely brief 39 years on this planet, he put out a huge amount of time and energy in America. He put it in America and on America. And his life was so short and he had so much to do in India. He wanted to do so much. He had just started the Ramakrishna order in India. He had just started the mission. He had just started laying out future plans. He had just started training his own brother monastic disciples about how to lead the order. He had plans for how to start the seva work. He had the work, he had ideas in mind for the women's order. He had so much to do. And he had just started the men's order. Yet he spent a huge amount of time and energy in the United States. Why? We are still in this country such a small movement. And you got to wonder, was it worth it? Shouldn't somebody, it seems like he was throwing seeds on hard ground that still have yet to sprout. It's like, shouldn't if someone had said to him, Swamiji, respectfully, don't bother. Just stay in India, you'll get a lot more done in India. So why would he put so much time and energy out in this apparently useless country? Wouldn't it be better if he had spent that time in India? I've thought about that a lot. Because, when all is said and done, when you get down to it, very few people in this country have ever heard the name Vivekananda. And even fewer people have heard the name Vedanta. They say vendetta or Vedanta. I think they cannot even pronounce it, let alone know what it means. And for the amount of cost that it extracted on his time and energy and his basic health, the payback seems pretty negligible. So wonder why he did it. So, we can be cold and say, was the effort that he invested in this country worth the effort? But it's significant that in 1896, Swamiji said, I have just begun my work. Now, this is what we have to really keep in mind when we think of Swamiji's work in the West, and particularly his work in the United States. Because only 6 years after he said those words, he was gone. He had thrown off his body. He appeared before Shashi Maharaj in a vision and said, Shashi, I've spat out my body. And the next morning, Swami Ramakrishna and Shashi Maharaj got a telegram saying that he'd passed away. And everybody was crushed. They were overwhelmed with despair and with grief, and they couldn't see how they could possibly go on. In fact, Swami Akhandananda, who loved Swamiji so much and who was so beloved by Swamiji, he stood in front of a train. He walked barefoot on the way to Bellarmont, then stood in front of a train, waiting for the train to hit him. And Swamiji appeared to him and said, I haven't gone anywhere. Get out of the way. And then he came to and got out of the way of the train. But it's like Swamiji hadn't gone anywhere then. And you know what? He hasn't gone anywhere now. He's still here. He's still here. And if it be any time when we needed Swami Vivekananda in our lives, it's now. So he's still here. When Swamiji died, his work was still in its infancy. It just started. It was like a little baby movement. So how could it go forward without him? And Swamiji gave a hint about this when he said, in America, I have raised only 1 or 2 waves. A tidal wave must be raised. Society must be turned upside down. The world must be given a new civilization. And he said, the world will understand what the power is and why I have come. Whoa. He said the world will understand. He didn't say when it would understand. And when Swamiji talked about what the power is, and that America still had no idea what the power was, and that what power stood behind Swamiji, America still doesn't understand the power. But it will continue to grow because that was Swamiji's will. But because of Swamiji, America's spiritual trajectory has dramatically changed, sort of vectoring off from what it would have been into what it is today. Had Swamiji not come, this world would be a very different place had Swamiji not come to America in 1893. So if the situation in the world seems absolutely terrifying today, just think of what it'd be like if Swamiji hadn't come to this country. Obviously, Swamiji knew why he had to come here. He was a rishi, he was a prophet. So he must have had good reason for pouring out all of his time and energy here in this ridiculous country, so far away from the Indian work that he loved so much and kept so close to his heart. It's obvious that Swamiji had something in mind when he asked 4 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna to come and build upon his work. We got to think Swamiji was here. Then he had Swami Abhedananda, Swami Sardananda, Swami Tyagananda, finally Swami Trigunatitananda. Altogether 5 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. He had something in mind. But you know what? Swamiji needed really strong medicine to change the very direction of American thought. And that's what happened. So in order to do what he needed to do, Swamiji knew he'd have to go live and work in the very jaws of American society by going to New York. And that was surely Swamiji's greatest renunciation. To live in the world's most powerful nation and to go into a country, into the bowels of the country, New York City, in a country drunk with its own arrogance of power and its arrogance of its own cultural, intellectual, and its own spiritual superiority, he thought. And he spent 4 years of his very short life just pouring out his time and energy, what remained in his life, cutting his own life short. And he worked without ceasing. He didn't stop for, what seems to be a really small return, when you come down to it. But then we have to say, what? Is that really so? Is that really the case? Because even before Swamiji got on board that ship and sailed to America, he turned to Swami Tyagananda and he said, Haribai, the Parliament of Religions is being held for this. And he said, pointing to himself, he said, my mind tells me so. He said, you will see it verified at no distant date. And of course, he was right, because nobody was prepared for the overwhelming response that he got at the Parliament of Religions. The Reverend John Barrows, who was one of the formers of the Parliament, and who Reverend Barrows had hoped with all his heart to have the point of the Parliament to show how Christianity was superior to every other religion. And he was going to show that, in fact, that people would all convert to Christianity after this great Parliament, because it would show how superior Christianity was. So Reverend Barrows wasn't really happy to say this, but he did say, when Mr. Vivekananda addressed the audience as sisters and brothers of America, he said there arose a peal of applause that lasted for several minutes. Now, Mr. Barrows wasn't terribly happy about this, but Swamiji himself wrote that a deafening applause of 2 minutes followed. Now, have you been to a concert where there's a standing ovation and you applaud? 2 minutes of having your hands bang against each other is a really long time. Your hands hurt. You're thinking, okay, when is this going to stop? If I stop it, people will think I'm a creep. It hurts. It's a long time. Mrs. Blodgett, who attended it, said that the applause lasted 7 minutes of deafening applause. It's a long time to be clapping. But then you got to think, okay, let's think about this. Sisters and brothers of America. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 5 words, and 5 words don't make anybody jump to their feet. Even a child can say it, and they often do. It's like, now you say sisters, okay, they can do it. But why did it make such a huge impact? Several reasons. First, Swami Vivekananda was speaking the truth when he said sisters and brothers of America, and truth is the most powerful force on the planet. Second, when Swamiji said sisters and brothers of America, he literally saw every one of those beings as his own brothers and sisters and brothers. And they could feel that vision of love and unity. They got that power he was talking about. And Swamiji's words were not just words. We just use words. But he conveyed that experience of unity. And he transmitted that feeling of unity to the audience. And they responded tumultuously because they felt that unity, and that unity is the basis of all love. And there's no magnet on the planet that's more powerful than love. We will do anything for love. Third, notice sisters became before brothers. And Swamiji's choice of sisters before brothers was significant. It's not the usual ordering. It's always men and women, blah, 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 brothers and sisters, not the usual ordering. But he went out of his way to highlight women before men. And that positioning wasn't lost on the audience either. They roared their approval of sisters and brothers. And Swamiji said this 27 years before women even had the vote in this country. Swamiji, with those words, invoked the power of Shakti. And as Swamiji wrote Shashi Maharaj, without Shakti, there is no regeneration for this world. Many of Swamiji's closest disciples and supporters in this country were women. Josephine MacLeod, Sarah Bull, Sister Christine, all the women in the Hale family, the Mead sisters, Mrs. Blodgett, etc., etc., etc. American women. But okay, we can look at it from another angle. 7,000 people really isn't all that many. It's like kind of a medium-sized rock concert. But what's really significant is that Swamiji's message caught hold. It caught fire. And it's still catching fire, and it's changing lives even today. That's what's significant. People don't know what Swami Vivekananda that they're getting the inspiration from. And people have no idea it's Vedanta because they can't even pronounce the word. So the question that we should ask ourselves is, well, okay, is that a problem? Now, frustrating as this is for people, those of us who love and adore and revere Swami Vivekananda, I'd suggest it's not a problem. Because Swamiji himself could care less if his name was known or remained unknown. He could care less. Because like Sri Ramakrishna, Swamiji had absolutely no use for name or fame. After his big triumph at the parliament, Swamiji wrote to Shashi Maharaj, Swami Ramakrishna. He said, I want to be a voice without a form. He said, the desire for name and fame has not yet crept into my heart, and I dare say it never will. He said, I am his instrument. He is the operator. I'm an instrument. He is the operator. Through this instrument, he is rousing the religious feeling of thousands of hearts in this far-off country. He said, remember, it is his will. I am a name without a form. I'm a voice without a form. That's very significant. Swamiji could care less. Swamiji's work is continuing in this country, and it's changing America really from the inside out. As y'all know, Everybody in this country does yoga. Yoga studios are as all pervasive as Starbucks. Yoga is like all over the place, even if they don't know who brought yoga to this country. But as investigative journalist Anne Louise Bardock wrote in her op-ed for the New York Times, precious few of the 16 million supple spandex-clad yoginis in the United States who sustain an annual $6 billion in hatha yoga industry seem to have a clue that they owe their yoga mats to Swami Vivekananda. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was across the street at our groundskeeper gardener's house, across the street, and I was picking, and it's two of the kids were outside, and I was outside, and I was picking camellias for Swamiji's puja. And I told him, I said, hey, how are you doing? I said, I'm picking camellias for Swami Vivekananda's puja. They didn't really know who he was. And I said, well, Swami Vivekananda brought Hinduism, Vedanta, to this country in 1893. Because of him, we have karma, we have reincarnation, we have yoga, we have dharma. And without him, we wouldn't have any of those. And they went, whoa, awesome. That's awesome. And I said, right, it is. It's awesome. It's like the guy you haven't heard of, him. That's the one we're celebrating. Awesome. Okay. Last year, before the lockdown, I went to Costco to pay for a gallon of laundry detergent that I got in the previous week. And it wasn't until I got all the way home, half an hour away, that I was going through the receipt and I saw that they hadn't charged me for this 1 gallon of laundry detergent. So the following week, okay, I go back to Costco and I find the floor manager and I said, hey, hi, last week I got a gallon of this detergent, but no one apparently saw it in my basket, so I want to pay for it now. And the guy was like, young enough to be my grandson. He was like, came up to here on me, which is saying something because I'm 5 feet tall. He was a Hispanic guy in his 20s. And he said, no, we can't do that. But, thank you so much. And I said, no, we really do want to pay for it. We felt bad about having it and not having paid for it. And he said, no, thank you for telling me. I'll make sure that the inventory gets changed, but you actually can't pay for it now. And I said, oh, I really wanted to pay for it. And he just patted me in the shoulder. He said, it's your good karma. And I just smiled and I said, thank you. But in my heart, I was going, oh, Swamiji, what have you done that I've got a Hispanic floor manager of Costco telling me about my good karma? It's like, go Swamiji, go Swamiji, awesome. America's changed. America's changed. Okay, on top of this, okay, Enrique, our Hispanic grounds manager, perfect genius, perfect human being. We're working across the street in the garden, and I'm weeding, and he's doing some heavy work. And out of nowhere, he looks at me and says, I don't want to be reborn. And I went, what? And he said, I don't want to be reborn. He said, there's so much suffering in the world. And I said, you're Catholic. And he just ignored that. And he said, there's so much suffering. I don't want to be reborn. And I said, yeah, but you know what? If you have desires, then, and karma, you're going to have to be reborn. And so we had this long discussion about karma and reincarnation. It's like, wait a minute. You're Catholic. All your kids are Catholic. They've all gone to catechism. We've gone to their baptisms. We've gone to their first communions. And you're talking to me about not wanting to be reborn? Hello. That's how much Swamiji has changed this culture. It's all throughout American culture. It's seeped. Swamiji's ideas have seeped into the culture. They're in all the TV things, all the little things that you don't even notice because we take them for granted, but it's seeped in. How did these ideas get in there? Well, no doubt Swamiji was a powerful speaker, and he was persuasive, but there's way more than fine oratory behind what we would have to say is a sort of a bewildering success. But the truth is, he offered something to the West that hadn't been offered before. It takes a lot of chutzpah for this young sannyasi who hadn't even spoke before an audience, this sannyasi to say, I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. I mean, that takes some kind of chutzpah. But Swamiji spelled out his message early at the Parliament. The first part, message of religious harmony. And the second was a Hindu corrective to the basic Western idea about what the basic human nature consisted of. Because according to Western religious philosophy, a human being was born into sin, period. We were stained from the beginning that we came on the planet. So rather than being born into sin, Swamiji said, ye are divinities on earth, sinners. It's a sin to call a human being so. It's a standing libel on human nature. You are souls immortal, blessed, free, and eternal. It's like, whoa. Third point, he talked about freedom. He said freedom from the bonds of imperfection, freedom from death and misery. You know, you talk to an American about freedom and you got a totally committed audience. You know, freedom is sort of like catnip to a cat for an American. You talk to us about freedom, it's like, I'm on it. You got me. Talk to me about freedom. We can't resist it. He talked about our innate freedom to be freed from death and misery. You got us. Swamiji emphasized that all religions had value, that in their essence, they point to the same truth. They're just seen through different lenses because of different time and different culture. Now today, 128 years after that parliament, the most recent Pew Forum survey on religion and public life found that over 70% of people who identify as Christian believe that, quote, many religions can lead to eternal life. Really? And get this, 57% of evangelicals think that many religions can lead to eternal life. It's like, whoa, that is so different from the Christianity I was born into in 1952. It's like that God was up there and he could be really tough and you had to believe in Jesus or down you went. So the ideas that Swamiji promoted and preached, they are not part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. They are not. All religions leading to the same goal, neither in Judaic or in Christian tradition, not there. But they struck an American nerve and they stayed in that nerve ever since. Now, true, there was at that time an atmosphere sort of favorable to Hindu thought because of the Transcendentalists and the New Thought movement, but that basically was kind of that top part of society that hadn't really filtered down. But because of Swamiji, his well-publicized lectures and his writings really made big inroads into American culture, and those inroads had not been made before. You know, the 4 years that Swamiji spent in this country were the most productive years of his entire life. And one of his most important contributions to the Western understanding of Hinduism was the publication of his 4 books on the yogas: Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Raja Yoga published in 1896. Now, since their publication, the 4 yogas have remained in print and have sold steadily ever since. They've made their way into libraries, into family libraries, family bookcases. And the ideas in them slowly percolated into American society. And these ideas of these basic paths to realization weren't new in the Hindu tradition, but Swamiji made them understandable for Americans. And they basically are roadmaps for spiritual realization. They're not just, easy bedtime reading. They're roadmaps for realization. There was nothing new in the material, but he made it user-friendly to Americans. You know, I was just reading Sister Deva Mata's reminiscences of Swami Vivekananda and the reminiscences of Swami Vivekananda, which I recommend. This is probably the fourth time I've read it. It's like, ooh, I forgot I read that. And I didn't realize that I'd read this before, but Sister Deva Mata said that during Swamiji's lectures around the country and after his big triumph at the Parliament, the number of, she's talking about New York. She said the people coming to his classes and lectures just keep growing. So they start with a room, then they need a bigger room, then a bigger room, then they needed a hall, and then a bigger hall, and then a bigger hall. And she said this, and I hadn't noticed this before. She said, among the most eager students were a number of teachers. She said, and the Swami's words were punctuated by the tap of their pencils, taking rapid notes. She said, not a sentence went unrecorded. And I am sure that if later anyone had made the circuit of New York centers of new thought, metaphysics, or divine science, they would have heard everywhere Vedanta and yoga in a more or less diluted form. Bingo. That's exactly what happened. Swamiji spoke to a number of people. That group kind of went out and told their friends, wrote it into New Age journals, got it to their friends. So it just kind of percolated into society. It's a very significant way in which Swamiji's thought percolated and started changing American society. That's why we have the New Age movement today. It came through these very, very early New Thought people. So American thought began changing from the very beginning of Swamiji's work in America. Now, Raja Yoga, which, as you know, details the yoga of meditation, was published 1896. Now, according to Elizabeth de Michaelis, who's a scholar at Cambridge, she said Raja Yoga was the first fully fledged formulation of modern yoga to be presented to the Western world ever. And this book had really far-reaching effects. William James' 1902 seminal book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, which is like a touchstone for psychology and philosophy, and religious studies, has been quotes at length from Raja Yoga, and it's been continually in print and used in classrooms since it was published in the late 19th century, quoting Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga was also greatly appreciated and studied very deeply by Leo Tolstoy, who wrote in 1908 that said, mankind must assimilate the heritage of Vivekananda along with that of other sages. Now, Raja Yoga continues to kind of knock down cultural dominoes even today. It was Raja Yoga that deeply influenced George Harrison, one of the Fab Four, the Beatles. You know, the Beatles very famously got into Eastern religion. Well, that was because George Harrison got into Eastern religion via Ravi Shankar, whose brother gave George Harrison a copy of Raja Yoga. So he was reading Raja Yoga, and he said, George Harrison said, our famous Beatle, by having money, we found that money wasn't the answer. Swami Vivekananda said, and he quotes this from memory because I saw the video clip and I was going, oh my God, I can't believe a Beatle is saying this. George Harrison says, if there is a God, we must see him. If there is a soul, we must perceive it. Otherwise, it is better not to believe. It is better to be an outspoken atheist than a hypocrite. And George Harrison then added, at last, I found someone who made sense and I wanted to go deeper into it. And he became a follower of Prabhupada, otherwise known as became sort of Hare Krishna, and lived and died that way through his life. It totally changed the direction of his life. You know, so having a Beatle quote Swami Vivekananda is pretty impressive. But, you know, so is having a president of the United States. President Obama, in his 2010 speech, quoted Vivekananda's September 11th speech at the Parliament. And then there's our mercifully former President Trump, who, though he completely massacred his name, invoked Swamiji when he visited India in 2020. So, you know, if presidents quote Swamiji, the rest of the West can't be too far behind. even if Trump, oh my God. So then we can look at today's tech industry, right? Okay, Google now offers an internal course called the Search Inside Yourself app. It's like, Google, really? Okay, eBay now has meditation rooms equipped with pillows and flowers. One of Twitter's founders has introduced regular meditation sessions for the workers. This is the West Coast biggest industry, the tech industry. Okay, it's not too hard to connect the dots between Swamiji and Google's meditation. It isn't also too hard to go shopping at Lululemon, where if you can afford to buy their pair of $100 yoga pants, I'm not kidding, $100, okay? If you get their yoga pants and they put it in one of their Lululemon bags, guess what? You pick up the bag and it says Brahmacharya on the outside. I went, I'm hallucinating. I'm hallucinating. Nobody in this country sells celibacy. What the hell? Brahmacharya? So it's like, how do you explain this? So I went on their website and I looked on their website, like Lululemon, and I found this quote regarding Brahmacharya. It says, the artwork is part of our Shoppers series, exploring the yamas, and it is in stores now. It's like the yamas and niyamas were introduced to America by Swamiji and, you guessed it, Raja Yoga. What? It's like Lululemon $100 yoga pants quoting Swamiji. Love it. So without Swamiji, no yogas, no yoga studios, no yoga pants, no meditation room. You know, after Swamiji's passing, it was hard, but a number of really well-known public figures continued spreading Vedanta thought throughout America. Joseph Campbell, J.D. Salinger, Aldous Huxley, Christopher Isherwood, Houston Smith. Then we have kind of a generational thing where Joseph Campbell's student, George Lucas, who followed Joseph Campbell around like a puppy, really started studying his philosophy and came into Vedanta his own way. And really through in his Star Wars, it's all about the thing of the Star Wars, what do you call it? Yoda, what's Yoda teaching? What they teach in the Bhagavad-Gita. What he teaches in the Bhagavad-Gita comes out through Yoda. But these are kind of our famous guys. I think it's a little more interesting to hear of the more unusual cases that you don't get the publicity about. Okay, for one example, remember that big thing they had in Chicago called Chicago Calling, the anniversary of the Parliament? I was talking there to Swami Shubhakarananda, who was President Maharaj's attendant at the time, and he saw this personally, so I heard it from him. He said that when Hillary Clinton visited India, she was presented with a copy of Romain Rolland's Life of Ramakrishna as a present. And she expressed her happiness at getting this present. She said, oh, we already have a copy of Christopher Isherwood's. We already have a copy of Christopher Isherwood's Life of Ramakrishna. We, of course, referring to another president, Bill Clinton. Now, no one has heard this, but I heard it myself from President Maharaj, who heard it from Hillary Clinton. At the same Chicago conference, I asked our young Russian Swami, Viktor Maharaj, who had been a staunch communist, how he discovered Vedanta. And he said when he was in the army, he was kind of bored. So he got up and there was a bookcase and he went to the bookcase, and in the book, she found a bookshelf and it contained in it a Russian translation of Romain Rolland's Life of Ramakrishna. A decade later, he became the Ramakrishna Order's first Russian-born sannyasi. Go Viktor Maharaj. Another one of our American swamis told me that I said, how did you find Vedanta? He said, well, I was in the army. I was bored. I went to the library and there was a bookshelf and I pulled out this thing called Raja Yoga. There we go again. We don't really understand how it spreads, but it has been spreading the whole time. Now, if I want to bring this to a personal level, had Swamiji not come to America, there's no chance that I would be a sannyasini speaking to you here today. There's no chance I would have discovered Vedanta at the Vedanta temple here when I was 15 in 1967. No chance that I would have been transformed by the grace of my guru and the grace of other great sadhus who have blessed my life with such abundance. Swamiji went way, way out of his way to make sure that women had every opportunity to lead a life of renunciation and service. In 1896, he gave sannyasa to Marie Louise, who later became Swami Abhayananda, who was really the not most promising of all candidates. And Swamiji got real blowback from India because of that. And in fact, her monastic career was kind of short-lived, but he did get blowback because the fact that he gave monastic vows, Hindu monastic vows, made the New York Herald. Well, that article got back to India. And so Swamiji gets this letter from Allah Singh. It's like, oh my God, this can't be true. And Swamiji goes, oh yes, it's true. Yes. She, Marie Louise, was the leader of the laborers, as if this is supposed to help things be better. It's like, she's what? You did what? It's like, First sannyasini didn't last very long, but it didn't matter because the toothpaste from then on was out of the tube and they would never go back into the tube. Swamiji inaugurated giving Hindu monastic vows, brahmacharya and sannyasa, to Westerners, both male and female equally. And once Swamiji created the pattern, that was the way the future would go. And you know what? So it has. So it has. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Swamiji. In fact, Swamiji wanted women to have a mat before the men. In a letter to Swami Shivananda Mahapurush Maharaj, Swamiji said, I'm coming to understand things clearer every day. My insight is opening out more and more. Hence, we must first build a mat for mother. First mother and mother's daughters, then father and father's sons. Can you understand this? To me, mother's grace is 100,000 times more valuable than father's. Mother's grace, mother's blessings are all paramount to me. Of course, that didn't come to pass because Swamiji passed away in 1902. The first convents of the Ramakrishna order began in the West, beginning with Swami Trigunatita in San Francisco, and later in Los Angeles with Swami Prabhavananda. The first brahmacharya was in 1949, and the first sannyasa was in 1959. And Sarada Mat in India didn't start till 1956, which is why actually the Western nuns we take our vows to the Ramakrishna order. We do not belong to Sarada Mat. Of all Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, Swamiji best understood who Holy Mother really was. He understood who and what Sri Sarada Devi was. That was why he trembled in her company and would not even touch her feet. Rather than like bowing down to her feet, you do a full body, Shishtanga Pranam, touching the ground in front of her feet, because he didn't think he was pure enough to touch her feet, even though he was purity incarnate. As Swamiji said, mother's grace, mother's blessings are all paramount to me. Swamiji wouldn't even go to the West. Even though all the money had been raised, given to him, he would not go until Sri Sarada Devi, Holy Mother, had expressed her opinion on the subject. And then finally, after a long wait, her letter came and she gave her blessings. And one of his brother disciples writes, Swamiji alternately danced and wept with joy and said, it is all right now. It is the will of the mother. It is all right now. It is the will of the mother. Weeping and dancing with joy. Swamiji's gift of himself to this country was given with the blessing and the will of Mother herself. You know, only last night I was reading the reminiscences of Swami Vivekananda. I came upon one I didn't remember, a Western disciple of Swamiji, H.J. von Hagen, who was in New York. And he wrote this about Swamiji. And now, though he, Swamiji, has gone into the great peace beyond, he lives in the message which he brought to us. He gave us the means that we may know the truth, but that's only the one part. The other is our duty, that we may live the truth. For that purpose, Vedanta societies have been formed. However mighty a nation we may be, Swamiji did not seek us for anything but for giving truth and wisdom, of which we are surely in need. Swamiji has successfully become a voice without a form, and that voice has changed America from the inside out. I can't even imagine what life would be like had Swami Vivekananda not come to this country in 1893. I can't even imagine it. He came purportedly to address the Parliament of Religions on Hinduism, but as we now realize, he came because he wanted to bring light and life to the Western world. Sister Nivedita wrote to her closest friend, Josephine MacLeod, in 1906. She said, you see, when we who understood Swamiji and remember him are dead, there will come a long period of obscurity and silence for the work that he did. It will seem to have been forgotten until suddenly, in 150 or 200 years later, it will be found to have transformed the West. Bingo. I understand now Nivedita was right. We shall bow our heads in profound gratitude that by the infinite grace of Thakur Raman Swamiji, our lives have been blessed by that living presence of Swami Vivekananda in our lives. Thank you. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Utacchate Purnasya Purnamataya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you so much. Would you take some questions if there's some?
Yes, I made sure that we had enough time for questions.
Okay, so
can I go first? Ushanti, this is Samrat.
Oh, sure, yes. Yes, Samrat.
Namaste.
Namaste,
My name is
Samrat.
Samrat.
Good to see you.
And yeah, same here. Such a wonderful speech, and we had a wonderful time. I just had a question, comment. As I was listening to this, I was, thinking that Swamiji, when he came to America, India was, under the rule of Britishers at the time, and Hinduism had become, unfortunately, a set of rituals. And that's how people were identifying, and people were going into a lot of different directions like Brahma Samaj and all that because of those set of rituals.
Yes,
so
they were trying to prove they were really Protestant in disguise.
Right. Right. And I feel that, Swamiji coming, obviously everything was part of script and everything was Thakur's wish that everything happened. But I feel that this had to happen because by coming to America and with the acceptance that he got from America and from the West, that kind of increased his, what should I say, increased his stature and acceptance in India as well. Because India at the time, to be
accepted by all to be accepted by Harvard, for example.
Right.
To be giving lectures in Harvard, to be accepted by all the intelligentsia.
Right.
To have that kind of stunning success,
right,
was such a what's the word I want to like, and the understanding, yes, what we have done, what our forefathers have done, our tradition is not only valid, it's worthwhile for the whole world, not just for us.
Right.
It's valid for everybody, and to have the understanding that our religion is a universal religion. It isn't just for me and my family. It isn't just for my God or your God. It's for everybody.
And such an acceptance back in India, and then the rest was history, because people like Mahatma Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose and all those freedom fighters, they got, very much inspired by Vivekananda and got into the freedom struggle. So India got free. So even though, initially you started nicely, about was it really worth it? I think it was worth it not only for the West, for the world, but also for India at the time, which was going through slavery mentality. And
it gave a lot of self-respect that a lot of it had been lost.
Right.
When you doubt your own worth, when you doubt that, oh, well, maybe they're right. No, and when you get that colonial mentality, when you're being told, and of course the problem was that all the educational systems were run by the British. So they tell you how stupid the ideas are, that you need to read English literature. Even that's why I love Sister Nivedita so much. It's like, don't try to imitate those Greek statues. Don't try to imitate European painters. You've got your own tradition. Go back to your own tradition.
Yeah.
It's like regaining, it's like going back to the soil which nurtured you. We need that. We need that. Right. And that's why I'm so excited about Swami Vivekananda coming to this country. It's like, we'll start our own kind of Vedanta here, our own tradition. Yeah. It won't be Indian. It won't be like Texan. It'll have its own little, it's like how Thai Buddhism is different from Tibetan Buddhism. It's like our own Hinduism will be different, but it'll be American born and it'll be comfortable for everybody, no matter who comes.
Thank you.
No matter what culture, no matter what color, no matter what gender, it'll be for everybody. Universal.
Thank you and namaste.
Namaste. Good to see you so much.
Same.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, Meera.
So my question is this, when we read Swamiji's works, so it seems, and I just want your sort of like your real thoughts on this. So does Swamiji become more of a feminist after his interactions with women in the West and the time he spends, especially in the US? At that time, there was the suffragette movement. There was a lot of women's involvement in labor movements and all that. So is it all right? Can we say with some confidence that the social interactions and the engagement he had with women in the West, especially with American women, like when he returned back, he became even more a stronger advocate?
I believe so. He was always a believer in women because his mother was a force of nature. That little woman was like, she was incredibly intelligent. And he was completely devoted to her. He loved his sister. She committed suicide because of such a terrible marriage and the problems with, she'd been tortured in her marriage. She committed suicide. That broke his heart. To see the condition of Indian women where young girls were married off and treated like chattel, that broke his heart. On the other hand, he loved the ideal of Sita. And he asked himself, is the ideal to suffer, or is it every culture has their own ideal? Who's to say that, but he loved the education of the American women. He wanted education first and foremost. He loved the independence of American women. He said perfect freedom is perfect independence. He loved the fact that American women were able to do things by themselves. There's this wonderful thing of Sister Christine where she was just annoyed as hell that she and Mary Funky were there at Thousand Island Park, and they were, wearing all these clothes as women did at the time. And Thousand Island Park was quite wild at the time. There was forested paths and everything, and going over rocks, and they were expecting him to offer a hand to help them out, and he just wouldn't do it. And she said, we were getting more and more annoyed, and he could read their thoughts, of course, and said, "You were expecting me to give you help." He said, "I would give you help if you really needed it, but you're as capable of walking here as I am. Why should I help you? Because you're a woman? Don't you understand that chivalry? And chivalry is only sex?" At first I read that, I thought, what's wrong with chivalry? I love the door open for me. And I thought, no, he's right. It just makes us much more aware, it's like, of gender. And the Atman is beyond gender. Why should we become so identified with one gender, or identify ourselves as the weaker sex, the softer sex, the gentler sex? No, Identify me as a divine being, perfectly capable of walking up a path myself. If I need help, I'll go for a person who's stronger. But he said he wanted her to really like get out of that labeling of, oh, this big man who was, can help me. It's like, no, stand on your own 2 feet. I love that about him. He was like really making people, he loved the education. He was very impressed when he went to a women's prison and a women's reform thing, seeing how the ideal was reform, not punishment, but learning a new way of being. No punishment, just he found the work of the early women suffragettes who were really dealing with social reform very inspiring, because it just showed like we can do this. But he said he never wanted to. He said nothing should be done at the cost of purity. Freedom to decide, yes, but not at the cost of purity, because then everything's gone. It's a good question, Mira. Thank you.
Well, but then can you contextualize what the last statement you said? So everything is lost without purity. But if you were to talk about it in today's times, like how would we even say that to a
Purity? It's like losing your. Women sometimes can give over their bodies because they feel they have to. They're not in a committed relationship. They do it because of passion. There's a lack of self-control. Just passion for the sake of fulfilling a temporary desire loses one's freedom. The greater freedom is to be able to have self-control. And he was a great one for like having that self-control. And it's a very unpopular message. That's why I nearly dropped dead when I saw brahmacharya written outside the Lululemon for selling yoga pants for their yoga butts. It's like, brahmacharya, are you kidding me? Do you even know what you don't even know what the word means? It's like, well, that means, and I read on the website, it's like, well, I don't have to have a cookie every day. It's like, if you think that's brahmacharya, baby, you got a long way to go. It's like, nobody wants to hear the unpopular message. But the fact is that we have our own volition, to use our own volition and our own self-control, rather than women are often sort of like, feel like we're at the mercy of popular opinion or what we ought to do, or like, I want this guy to like me, so therefore I have to do this. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But understand, if you do want to do, why you're doing it. Are you doing it out of power? Or are you doing it out of a temporary passion you're going to regret in about an hour? Are you going to do something that you might have to live with the rest of your life? Are you doing something because you have respect for yourself and you honor yourself and you honor the person you're with? I think a lot of it, people just jump in and think later, and then it's like, in my line of work, you see a lot of the other side of it. It's like, oh dear. We have to live that. All Holy Mother said, one must be very careful. Every action has consequences. Every action has consequences. We can never do anything to hurt anyone, including ourselves, because that will come back to us in very unfortunate ways. So always be careful.
So how do we build a culture where, sometimes that sense of the individual self versus what is a collective culture, that's where it gets harder.
Yeah.
So how does anyone navigate that?
I think by choosing our friends and the ones that we open our hearts to and listen to very carefully. That's why they really have value for sadhu sangha, the value of like-minded devotees, because we're influenced by people that we're around, and we're influenced by the people we love, and we're influenced by the people we respect. So we have to keep the voices in our head, the voices that are going to give us the message that keep us at a level where we want to be, and not people that when we're in their company, realize, this is going to a place where I just don't feel right about it. Or after being in their company, we think, yeah, I just don't feel as kind of okay as I did before when I walked in. And I think this takes a lot of self-examination. And a lot of that just comes over time. That we say like, yeah, that wasn't the best. I mean, when I was much younger, I had friends that were doing all kinds of things. And I was like, oh, but they're my friends, It's like, they're doing things that are just not okay. Not okay. I love you. I will salute you from a distance, but I'm giving you a break for a while. So one of them I ended up having to do a memorial service for, because his bad path just kept getting badder and badder and badder. And finally he died of it. And the other one is just remarkable. And we're very good friends, and he's really turned his life around in a remarkable sort of way. But you just sort of, thoughts are contagious. Conversation is contagious. Vibes are contagious. So we really have to be careful about, we're careful about coronavirus, but there's the virus of hatred and anger and passion and just bringing our minds down. And that's just as dangerous, and the effects are more long lasting. That virus can really kind of like pull away at our souls. And we sort of lose our compass in this world. And we have to keep that moral compass going. It's like, what is the best for my spiritual life? What's the best for my life? What is the good for my family, my society, my friends? Is this going to raise everybody up, or is it going to bring them down? Because everything's connected. We're all connected to one another. Life isn't as easy as you think when you're much, much younger. It's like, oh, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to have so much fun. It's like, yeah. Good luck with that. Thank you, Mira.
Anyone else have a question? Okay.
Rama, I see Rama here.
Yeah, Leslie, I think it's Leslie. Yeah.
That's my niece.
Oh, your niece, okay.
She's also a devotee, a disciple of Swami Sarada Devi.
Does she have those pants? Do you?
She's.
I hope you can hear me.
I can. Yep.
You can?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Swamiji used to carry around the Bhagavad-Gita. Am I correct?
Yep. And
there was one other.
Yes, a Christian book, which was hold on, anonymous.
Imitation of Christ. Imitation of
Christ. Yes, sorry, Imitation of Christ. It was like I could see the spine of the book, and I was trying to read the title of it, The Imitation of Christ, because it's total renunciation. Total renunciation.
I was curious if Swamiji has any like writings, or if you have any idea of what he would say is the main takeaway of Bhagavad-Gita. I was asked about that in one of my classes, and I was like, that's a really interesting question. So I'm curious.
I think renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna said, you get the message of the Gita by turning it around. Gita, tagi, renunciation. It's all about the renunciation of the ego, giving up the ego. There's so much incredible stuff about karma yoga, how to work. It's all about giving up the ego, not expecting results for ourselves, giving up the ego. Everything with the jnana yoga about who I really am. It's not this, hi, here I am. It's like, I'm one with all beings. I'm the Atman, not born, not dying, never ceasing, never beginning, birthless, deathless. That's who I am. Renouncing that the small I for the big I. Renunciation, but it's the R word, and Americans hate the R word. There's no word more painful in American than renunciation. Except for maybe celibacy.
Yeah. Anyone else has questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rama.
This was good. I'm only very glad to see.
Oh, I see someone here.
Who?
Pradeep's wife. Are you?
Yeah, Shikha.
Shikha.
Yes, Shika. This is
Hi.
you remember Pradeep's wife? Yes, I'm Shika.
But I couldn't.
She doesn't like that.
Yeah, I'm
She
bad with
didn't like
names.
it.
I'm a downright feminist, so I want my own identity, not somebody's wife.
Yeah. But then you have to put your name up here, baby.
Yeah, because I'm sharing with his computer. I could have done it in my iPad, but we sit
No,
together.
then you
all
can
the
do it
time.
on your iPad, and then he can become Mr. Saha.
He
Are
will
you
not
Shika's
like
husband?
it. Mataji, he will not like it.
I was known in Kolkata as Shikha Saha's husband. So
Okay.
Mataji, I have a question. You know the Thoreau, who was the American philosopher,
Yes.
THO, and
Thoreau, yes.
does Vivekananda has any sort of relationship, like Thoreau was influenced by him or
I think vice versa.
vice
Actually,
versa?
not. Thoreau had read, was one of the early transcendentalists, and he had read some translations of the Bhagavad-Gita
Uh-huh.
that he'd been deeply influenced from. And I believe there was a translation of the Upanishads that had been put into German and then put into English that was kind of like a little strange, but he had read that as well. So he had definitely a lot of influence of Eastern thought, but their paths, was no longer around when Swamiji came in 1893. I don't think Thoreau was even alive at that point,
Yeah.
nor was
Because-
Emerson. But
Yeah.
they sort of stirred the ground of the intelligentsia, the transcendentalists kind of stirred the ground. So they made it for that top upper crust of American society.
Mhm.
They really made the seeds. It wasn't like totally fresh for some of these people in the high intelligentsia. For most of the people in the country, they had never heard of the transcendentalists, because that was located to a very small amount in the East Coast, in the Boston area.
But I know he was influenced by the Eastern philosophy, and when I was doing my master's, and the thesis that I did was like a social history, which after doing the research and in my conclusion, it was said that we all believe that Gandhi brought like non-vegetarianism and all the ahimsa to the Western society, but my probe said that Thoreau influenced Tolstoy, and Tolstoy influenced Bernard Shaw and the humanitarians in Great Britain.
Mhm.
And then when Gandhi came to England for his studies or for his work, and he came in contact with Henry Salt, a person of the writer in the humanitarian group, and then he influenced Gandhi more and more to all this. And then it came back to Martin Luther King. So the whole circle was formed.
Yes.
How
There
far
was-
it is true, I don't know, but all my research led to that.
Tolstoy was deeply influenced by Indian thought. And because it wasn't that far away from Russia, and there was quite a connection at that point, but he was given a copy of Raja Yoga and he was deeply influenced by it. And he loved Gandhi. So, and there was so much, Swami Lokeshwaranandaji and I got into this huge fight about who was a greater writer, Tolstoy or Shakespeare. And he fought for Tolstoy because he was Russian. And I fought for Shakespeare because, of course, Shakespeare's perfect. But there was always that wonderful connection. But and actually, Tolstoy wanted to publish a bunch of Swamiji's writings into Russian, but he died before it could happen. He'd actually got a publishing company to get all this stuff ready for publishing, which was just fantastic to imagine had that gone. But a lot of this material did seep into Russian society. I heard a lot of that from when I went to India and spent some time with Swami Lokeshwarananda, who was the first Swamis to go over to Russia and spend time there.
Mhm.
Very interesting work.
I
So
think
yes,
there's
it all
also
makes
a
for a
book-
full circle.
There's also a book on about Tolstoy. I saw it in some Vedantic center. I don't remember the name of the book, but it is there.
There's a book, Tolstoy and Eastern Thought, I've seen.
Yes, probably that. Yeah.
Mata, could you repeat the name of the book, Reminiscence of Swamiji by, is that, yeah, is there a book?
The Reminiscences, hold on 1 minute, don't move.
Okay. Oh yeah, I had that one. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. I'm rereading it for about the 4th time, and I
Yeah, my favorite book. My favorite book.
so
Yeah.
you read it and then you put it down, and some people you get more interested in, like the name Von Hagen is like, what do you have to say? It's like, whoa, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a one small question. You know, I mean, you said that, you know, be careful what company you keep and all that. But I think, you know, as you evolve in your own, you know, goals, you know, what you have set up for you. So, you know, you leave some, you know, people behind because, you know, you are friendly with them. You were, you know, kind of, you know, having the company and all that. But as you evolve and you find there's nothing much common with them anymore, so how you can get be yourself and go more and more toward your own goal without being you know, not caring, not rude, not
No, you in this it, you just be yourself. I've got plenty of friends who are not the slightest bit interested in Vedanta, not the slightest bit interested in religion. And I just say who I am, what I do. And I just, this is my name. You can get used to it. And this is what I do. You can get over it. And eventually, a lot of people eventually just come around. I had one woman who was finally said to me, she said, I was singing in a choral group, and she said, I want to stand next to you. I said, sure, come on. And she said, I don't know why, but I just feel really peaceful next to you. So it's just, I think the more that we do our own spiritual life, we don't really have to talk too much. It's like people just feel something.
Yeah, I hear that, you know, then I say, Auntie, we miss you, Auntie, we need to, okay, you know, I have this event going on, come and see Auntie there, you know. So it takes a time for them to, you know, kind of get into that. But this is the only way I have found to invite them into what I am doing. You know, we have Sunday song, things like that, you know, so it does work. But again, you know, there's a time for everyone.
Right. And we can't try to talk to anyone, push anyone.
Yes.
It's just like, if you think a person may have a possibility, like my beautiful niece, it's like, I sent her the link. I said, you might be interested. She's a yoga teacher. You might be interested.
Yeah, that's good. That's right. Yeah, that's how I try to, you know, connect with the people I don't have in common by inviting them. Okay, if you want to have my company or want to see me, come do what I'm doing. Come join what, you know, I am intending. So I think what is a good, you know, way to do that, motivate them and introduce them, you know. But some it doesn't work because time is not right for them.
Not their time, and it's fine. It's fine. Everybody has to go on their own process.
Exactly.
So it's like, you know, Lord bless them.
Yeah.
May I know? Excuse me. May I know what's the writer's name for that book? Reminiscence of Swami Vivekananda. What's the writer's name, please?
It is his Eastern and Western admirers.
Oh,
The
so
authors are considered, and it was Deutsche Ashrama. It's just the authors are Eastern and Western admirers.
okay.
How's that for specific?
Thank you.
Right, or it's just all the different people have written about.
Yeah, right.
This is my favorite book.